Angela. How are you?
Just fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm well. I'm happy to be talking with you today. I know you're juggling an awful lot in this strange new time that we're in. Let's begin with how you are doing in your family. How is the new normal for you all?
We're all doing pretty well. You know, like everybody, it's a change for us. I love family dinners and family gatherings, and it's been a little bit of a yin and yang for us because I think Arnold is going into family safety. So he wants us to pretty much be on, telephonic communication, whereas my mom, gathering gear has kicked in, and I want to be able to have we have 5 children, so I have 3 boys and then he has 2. And I want to be able to have an exception where we can have the 5 over, maintaining social distance in the house. So we compromised, which is what you often have to do in families. And we have been able to have our 5 grown children over, but the rule is we have them on the patio on nice days. And my husband and I fortunately get along and like each other fairly well. So we have endured, just being each other's only human contact, I would say pretty well. So
that's good fortune. Not everybody can make the same report.
I agree.
So, interestingly, your career on the bench and then your husband's in the police force, you have really unique perspectives on what the pandemic means for a community as well as globally through your work. So what are some of your immediate observations as to how do we run a court system when there's no guidebook for anything like this in history, really? Or at least not in this century, we can safely say.
Yeah, I can say, Teresa, I've been on the bench 18 years. And I practiced law for a little more than 12 before that. And there's never been a circumstance where we couldn't physically gather to discuss cases. And even more importantly, here in the United States, we have very important due process rights. So unlike many other countries that you visit, our people that are accused with violating the law have an ability to be in a courtroom, to see who's accusing them, to hear right out of their mouth what's going on. To be able to talk to the judge. I'm sitting here in my courtroom, so I'm looking out at counsel table where I would normally be listening to an individual. And that's an important part of our system. I know I've done a lot of traveling in Mexico, and they have a written system of law where the judge looks at a file and makes determinations. And that seems crazy to us as Americans. Without being derogatory about any other system, just because we're used to that tradition of having confrontation, of having an adversarial proceeding, of having a lawyer here and a lawyer here, and they make arguments, and we hope that the best outcomes result from that. And in this situation, immediately, almost overnight, we went from this robust court system where, we are the busiest building in the state, the Hall of Justice and the Judicial Center, in terms of the number of people who come through these buildings, to, the eerie feeling of walking into work and just having a few clerks and a few sheriffs. And a lot of judges are trying to do, write orders and do things from home. We all tend to come down here when we have hearings, but then instead of being in a courtroom with lawyers and litigants and people interested in what we do, and oftentimes even the media, you walk into a large empty courtroom. And you get on a computer like you and I are right now, and you may have the person accused in front of you, and then you get on a phone and you have the lawyers in, and then you get on another computer to create a court record. And that all sounds fairly easy, but you can imagine the meetings that had to go into place with all the partners it takes to run a court system to develop a new protocol for dealing with that. So it's been, I can say, a real challenge, probably one of the most challenging things I've ever dealt with in my professional career, because it does involve the pull between those very important aspects of being an American. So, if you're charged with something, we don't lock people up willy-nilly. That's a serious thing to take away somebody's liberty interest. But then when we start talking about, locking people up or putting them in jail without the right to have a hearing and be in front of a judge, that feels bad to all of us. So you have to try to quickly come up with the next best thing. And I can tell you the first 3 weeks of this virus and our governor putting us under a state of emergency, at all levels of the court system. So all the way up to our statewide Supreme Court. I'm currently the chief judge, so I'm kind of the focal point for, articulating our decisions. But we've had so many different kinds of meetings through Skype and Zoom. We all had to get up to speed on these technologies quickly. And it's been a real challenge. I can tell you though, for anybody that's watching this, that's just interested in what's going on in the world outside of their own silo, that I have been impressed with how thoughtful and compassionate and aware all of the people involved in this decision making, from our clerk's office to our prosecutors to our lawyers who defend people charged. I mean, everybody I feel like has tried to work for the best interest of our system. And that has been a good thing, and that's been a positive thing. I can also say that it's been a lot of hard work. I mean, I've been up, at 11:30 midnight with Supreme Court justices, just talking through how things are going to run the next day. So, it's been difficult, but I think it's we're on to a strange new normal where we're holding hearings in criminal cases and even beginning to hold hearings in civil cases. We are moving on and having hearings, and that feels good. Every day that I have cases, and I had 3 people today, do pleas and get their cases resolved in my court. So it feels good to be able to keep the justice moving. Exactly.
So you've said so many things that could take us down multiple tangents. But the first one I'm going to just grab onto and think about for 1 second is the way you said the court system in Mexico is a series of written dossiers. And what I find interesting about that is that it removes potentially the obstacles that occur when there is great wealth on one side and less wealth on the other. When we really have to lay the facts down in black and white, it seems less likely that somebody might be able to buy their way out with a smooth, lawyer. I don't know. Is there any observations in that realm?
Kind of what I hear you asking is, if we had a written tradition where I received a police report, I received witness statements, and I looked at that file and I made a decision, would that be a case? Not only do we have in the justice system and the judicial branch of government this concept that we have to weigh and balance things, but also usually Lady Justice, looks like this. She's right. So I think your question is, well, as much as we have this strong belief in this oral tradition that we have, and an oral tradition of advocacy and being in front of your accuser, is justice more blind, aka more fair, if you're just looking at written documents? I can tell you from years of being a prosecutor and being a judge, I pick up, I don't have one out on my bench with me, but I pick up a case file and review it on every case I have. And that will, it will have that similar kind of information. It'll have a police report saying what happened when the 911 call went out and the police made their run. It'll have, sometimes copies of witness statements. Generally has these days, officers wear a body cam. I can watch the body cam. So I can look at a lot of information, but it's hard to quantify, having someone undergo some questioning about a statement live in person, or seeing the earnestness of someone who is trying to get on a path to do better, or to, beat an addiction and enter into recovery, or just that ability for me to be able to communicate with the defendant about what's expected or what their opinion is. And I can tell you, I find great value. Sometimes I think most judges would tell you they've had an experience where they review a case file and it doesn't sound very serious. And then you hear the victim of the crime real time, and that changes dramatically. Or the reverse, where you look at a case file and you think, oh my gosh, this sounds like a horrific crime. But then you hear from the witnesses and the people involved, and it takes on a different tone. So I appreciate that question, because I think as a system, we always need to be looking at disproportionality, whether it's disproportionate minority confinement, whether it's LGBTQ individuals and whether they feel that they're treated fairly, whether it's any minority group. I think as a system, we cannot turn a blind eye that statistically some of those populations are in a good position to argue that are they treated fairly? Is justice blind? So I'm not saying we shouldn't be very aware, educate ourselves, and, look at from police arrest through to conviction, through to post-conviction, to look at those things. But I can't imagine, it's even different for me having lawyers argue to me just, here in this format, meaning on Zoom or Skype or over the phone, versus being able to see them and hear them. So I really value that part of what we do. And I think in some places in Mexico, they are working to change their system to a more oral tradition. But I just think it adds a lot. It adds a lot to see and hear.
So I can't help but then notice that the judicial system suffers, as we all do. Something is lost in translation, something of our humanity, when it is not face to face, voice to voice, eyes to eye, human to human. Right. We are all missing in our personal lives, hugs, meetings, shared meals. And in the courtroom, I guess we, like you're saying, the power of looking a human in their eyes who has contrition or recognizes a mistake, or somebody who recognizes perhaps they shouldn't have brought something to the court, whatever it is, the human moment is profound. Right.
No, well said. And that's true. You're right. All of that, I think, hopefully guides us to more fair and just outcomes. And it's not that we're not having fair and just outcomes now. I don't think that the lawyers involved or the judges would go forward if we didn't think there was. But, I have put a few people on probation, for example, remotely. And like you said, just being able to look at them and say, do you understand what I'm saying? Do you have questions for me? Just a little better real-time give and take, obviously, is preferable. So you're right. You're right about all of those observations.
Well, it's everybody I've spoken with so far has either expressed nearly a pain at being isolated and alone, or profound emotion over being able to support families who are isolated financially now because of what needs to be done for the greater good. I mean, it's a really profound set of emotions that I think we're all experiencing, and the lens of your profession certainly shapes it. The next question is, what might we hope to carry forward? What's possible to carry forward? Because I don't think it's realistic to think things are going to ever be how they were. They may potentially be better. I don't think they'll be worse, but they're going to be different. We're going to know more, and I think we'll be capable of better. What are your feelings about what we can take forward?
On a really big level, maybe bigger than just, our justice system, on a really big level, I think that this whole pandemic and this crisis over a virus and the dynamic of, not being able to be around other people professionally, personally, to me, the biggest takeaway, or the big, lightning bolt to the head, is just how interconnected we all are. This virus doesn't stop at state borders. It doesn't stop at country borders. I have friends just from work through our World Affairs Council of Kentucky and Southern Indiana that I've met throughout the world, and from doing an internship in France in summer when I was in college. I have friends there, and it's been really kind of fun through WhatsApp talking about our shared experiences of being in quarantine and not being able to get out. And it's one of the few times I can think of, I always like to stay in touch with people everywhere, but it's the first time we're really all going through the same thing. We're going through our businesses being closed, and the stress of worrying about everyone's health, the stress of worrying about our economies. And then if I bring it down to my justice system level, I worry about our prisons and our jail populations, because they're a lot like, the homes, the care homes, where you have a captive population. I worry about making the right decisions about who needs to be there and who doesn't. We want the people to be there that need to be there for our community to be safe. And we have done a lot of work in trying to reasonably and rationally release those that we can that have lower level offenses. But each one of those decisions is really difficult. And we've never faced it in quite this way. I don't think anybody would want, a death penalty imposed for a theft kind of charge. And all of a sudden you're looking at where we're incarcerated has this increased risk if they have asthma or if they're at a vulnerable medical situation. It creates a whole new set of concerns. So I worry about the jail. Our corrections folks are working hard, but if you can imagine just the people that have to go in and work there every day, how difficult that must be given the threat of this virus, just like with our healthcare workers. They're putting themselves on the line in order to be able to serve those who don't have as much a voice in our community. So from a system, I worry about that. I worry about my colleagues, the lawyers and the judges just trying to get the job done and facing, new challenges. So all of it has been, some amount of stress, but there's the nice shared experience, I guess, that we're all having. And, the start of this whole side of our discussion has been, what can we take away from this? And it just makes you realize not to take for granted, that you can get up and go to work. That I have never thought to be grateful that lawyers have the ability and litigants to appear in front of me and be heard. I laugh with my staff because I'm not an overly technical person. In other words, I'm not great at technology, and I have to sit out here on my bench now and not just worry about the decision, but just the act of getting everyone in the same place at the same time on the same case. So, if you hit one number off in 5 phone numbers you're dialing, or if the jail has walked out of the room to get another person, just the logistics have become a challenge that I never knew to take for granted, that everybody could just walk in my courtroom and be heard. So we're all going through that. And as you know, when we have these conversations, and whoever's watching this conversation that you and I are having, in some arena in their world, they're shaking their head. The hairdressers are thinking, who thought to be thankful someone could just walk in and sit in my chair and have a cape thrown on and get their hair cut or get their nails done, or to go in a store and pick out a gift for a friend. All these things that we never thought were gifts, that we never thought not to take for granted. That's what, unfortunately, sometimes bad situations bring to us, is the need to be grateful for what we had that we didn't recognize.
Oh, that seems to be a truth for much of humanity, that it has to be taken from us for full appreciation to occur.
It's terrible, isn't it?
How can we? Surely we'll learn a little bit from this,
I know.
My gosh. So, I'm also curious, Angela, as it relates to liberties that you've discussed with regards to punishment. How are you processing, or you and your colleagues, people who are, challenging their personal liberties with regards to stay-at-home measures for societal health and safety?
Yeah, that's one of the places we've seen the biggest division in terms of opinion about that. There's a lot of support. People want to feel safe. They want people to have to stay home if they could be a threat to everyone else. I always say you have to think of our grandparents and people with health issues. You have to be thinking about them. But then there have also been, some criticisms that as a government, can we, restrict anyone's freedom of movement? We take very dear our right to be able to come and go as we please in this country and to say what we please. So anytime you start, doing things that affect that, you hear from some people in the population who just don't agree. And I hear that. I want to be respectful of that. I want to try to, understand where everybody's coming from, but you have to make the best decision. And in some of these cases, we have made the determination that we want to have these folks stay home for the bigger picture of, keeping more of us healthy.
So, Angela, if you could, offer a piece of advice or guidance from your learnings thus far for future generations, what would you say?
So I guess the one thing professionally I am taking away is just breathing, listening, taking in multiple points of views. The hardest thing is the landscape keeps changing. You know, when we first started, we thought, okay, here are going to be the parameters. It's just going to be 3 weeks. We'll wait civil cases. We'll concentrate on people in custody. Now that it's grown on, we have to keep opening up in different ways the kinds we can handle, because we don't want the wheels of justice to stop.
Right.
And you know, many of us, like I said, are just finding new and different ways to have justice happen. And so that's a good thing.
What are you finding through this all? Last question, Angela, what is essential to you? We all know food, shelter, clothing is essential. What's emerging or changing or remaining steadfastly true as to what's essential to you?
Are you asking Judge Bisig, or are you asking, is that a professional answer, or is that a personal answer? Are you asking Angela as a human being, or are you asking me as a judge?
I'm asking the person who is a judge as a profession.
I guess, you know, what's essential is feeling as though, for me, what's essential is feeling as though I am doing the best I can at what I'm tasked to do. So as a judge, as you know, putting on my hat as a judge, am I going to get it right and please everyone all of the time? Probably not. But what you want in your decision makers is somebody that's applying the law, looking at this new landscape, trying to shift and pivot and make it work. And if you can lay your head down and say, I really tried my best during this difficult time to get this right, it helps when, you know, you look at something or you hear something and maybe you weren't perfect. What people can ask of you is to, you know, be doing your best with that. And I think that shifts over into my personal life with my husband and my own family and my own father. And, you know, just serving them and trying to be good for them during this process, the same thing. To what's essential is laying your head down at night, no matter how much you're worrying about any of this, to say, okay, did I approach my slice of it? You know, we each have a slice. Everybody's got their part. They're trying to, did I approach my slice of it with my best effort?
Thank you so much for your time and your candor and your, you know, just being who you are. I know you approach your job as you do your personal relationships with quality, respect, authenticity, and just kindness, Angela. You're really wonderful.
Oh,
thank you.
That's nice of you to say. Thank you, Teresa. Thanks for doing this. You're a good person to get stories out. I think it's a good time to let the community hear what's going on in other silos and what considerations there are. I think that's very valuable. So, and it's nice for anybody who's taken time to listen and kind of learn about what's going on in the justice system and other parts of our community.
Thank you.
Thank you.